Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia, and this is the summary for the day of 572 to 573 for the 18th to the 19th of September in the Ukraine war or the special military operation in Ukraine. Let's start off with the Black Sea. At the Black Sea, we have yet another Russian airstrike on Ukrainian vessels that is trying to land on Crimea. 14 boats was detected that Sukhoi 25 was being sent, and they struck this boat with 4 times Fat 500 cluster munitions, and several boats were damaged and then they returned. So the Ryba did not claim that any of these boats were destroyed. They are simply damaged. And there is also a drone strike. It's actually a attempted drone strike. It's launched together with that those landing craft that was traveling to Crimea. Is part of this new Ukrainian tactics of attacking Crimea with combined arms, combined attacks. However, these drones did not manage to reach the Belbek air base. So this is the air base that they were targeting. You can see there's fighter jets, in this image. So so the drones were taken down by electronic warfare, and then 2 more while they are arriving at Belbek, they got shot down. So basically, that's all that we know. Southwestern. Oh, or maybe this is the one. Is this the Belbek one? Yeah, maybe this is the one. I'm not sure. Let me check. They say and another over the southwestern part of Sevastopol. Also, sorry, it must be this one because I did search for this place. So anyway, moving on into the southern front. At the Kherson front, we have geolocation of Ukrainian forces over at the south of this Antonovsky railway bridge. But this geolocation is not good news for the pro-Ukrainians. This is actually a TOS-1A strike, a shelling on the Ukrainians. The flamethrower system fired on the Ukrainian forces over at this bridge area, and so likely anyone around this area is now all dead. So hopefully they are actually run over here. They were actually hiding over here, and very few casualties over this part if they really want to hold this front line. And another geolocation, information, there is reinforcement at the Kozaksky Island. So according to Ryba, the pro-Russian source reported that more and more forces is now landing into here, into the island, and they are actually establishing a foothold over on the island of Kozaksky. And this is reported by Ryba. They say that this is 131st Reconnaissance Battalion, and they were covered by mortar crews. And then there's also landing in the north of Pristepny. Pristepny is over here, and there is Ukrainian forces landing here. This is also an existing beachhead that they actually have, and they continue to land. This group called Normandy landed there to start to prepare observation posts to continue to hold this position on the southern bank of the Dnipro River. There is a geolocation. This geolocation, I call it the geolocation of airstrike, because what's important is that this warehouse over here that the Ukrainians are using got struck by a Fat 500. What is the significance of this position getting struck by the airstrike of this Fat 500 or Fat 1005 is that we haven't actually seen the Russians using the bombers in this area here. They haven't really fly to this area to drop bombs in the frontline positions for some time due to the existence of Ukrainian surface-to-air missiles. The fact that they are now back again to drop airstrikes suggests that the surface-to-air missile systems in this area has been neutralized. So this is the significance of this airstrike that we are seeing on the eastern part of Antonovska. And then there is also further information. Intelligence suggests from Ryba suggests that a large concentration of manpower and equipments are at Davydiv Brid. This convoy was spotted at Davydiv Brid, and the military equipment tends to be mostly light armor, and this is probably a force that the Ukrainians are currently preparing to be sent over and to be sent on the amphibious operation over on the southern bank. Ryba noted that the light vehicles are able to move on soft ground better. So this is probably the choice. Over further up north, at Kryvyi Rih, there is this viral video that I did post on the DPA War channel, where the Lancet suicide drone was used on the Ukrainian MiG-29 that was sitting over here, and the drone basically somewhat missed the target. Did not have a direct hit, but it does hit the tarmac and probably still damage the MiG-29. And this is very important in the sense that the Lancet are not known to be used this far out. The distance between this to the front line is actually 70 or over 70 kilometers. So 70 to 80 kilometers is pretty far a distance for a Lancet. Lancet is possible to go up to 100 kilometers, but usually they are not used in that way because they are hover or loitering munition. So their fuel might not be able to last 100 kilometers, but this is pretty deliberate and it actually hit the target. On top of that, the video also suggests that there's a secondary drone. There's actually another Russian drone that is flying overhead, that is monitoring and capturing the footage of this attack, which means that the Ukrainians actually have no means to even shoot down this surveillance drone that was flying also 70 kilometers away from the front line. And so this must be very disturbing for the Ukrainian side, because the Russians can now basically operate at will up to 70 kilometers from the front line and monitor everything using surveillance drones, and actually send Lancet to take out any targets that they can spot. So this is actually a huge development, I would say. It's just as big as the introduction of Bayraktar TB2s for the Ukrainian side, where that creates a strategic problem for the Russian side. Game changer, I'm not sure, but it does show that there is additional consideration for the Ukrainian side to think about. Over at the Zaporizhia front, before we go to the front line, there is a convoy being spotted at Dnipro. This is a pretty big convoy, 132 units of vehicles that was passing through Dnipro city, and this includes 56 Kirby armored fighting vehicles, 20 Hammers, 10 VABs, as 5 Motiv MRAPs, and also 2 TB70 plus 2 Husky, then RM70, MLRS, and Grads, and 3,300 troops in total. So this is a very, very huge force. And I also want to note that this variety of armored vehicles seems to be a very mixed match. Over at the Zaporizhia front, we also have a gathering of forces over at Vasilyanka. So assault battalion is currently positioned over at this position. We're not sure what they will be using it for. Is it to be used as a reserve force in case the Russians actually launch a sudden attack and then they can actually intercept this attack? Or will they be actually used as an assault to try to capture this elusive Zeribyanki position? But we shall continue to monitor to see whether they will even get deployed. Over at the Orikhiv sector, at the Orikhiv sector, the Ukrainians continue their attack over at Novoprokopivka and Verbove. But of course, as usual, the front line have not really changed at Novoprokopivka. The front line is actually pretty much still in the southern part of Robotine. This Robotine is still pretty much over here. Geolocation also suggests that the Ukrainians are pretty much stuck in place. They are only purely holding the position around here. And military summary geolocated the Ukrainian forces to be here, and another geolocation by Creamy Capri actually geolocated Ukrainian forces to be here. So pretty much they're still at the forest line, and they can't really get out of it. It's pretty bad. The situation is quite bad actually. And then the Russians actually are reportedly conducting counterattack over at the Robotine region. So Ukrainian Defense Ministry as well as Deep State UA both talked about a Russian counterattack over at Robotine. So I'm not sure how big is this attack. Maybe they're claiming this is counterattack, but actually it's just the Russians shelling the hell out of these Ukrainian forces. This is actually very consistent with my theory that the Russians are simply tactically redrawing after their defensive position cannot be held, and then they just shell the hell out of the Ukrainian forces that continue to move forward into very hard to entrench positions, because the entrenchment has all been destroyed by the Ukrainians themselves. So the Russians will redraw. They will not fight for ground unnecessarily, and then they just hold a much more defendable position, and the Ukrainians are stuck in the no man's land. Ryba actually reported that the Ukrainians are still trying to attack around in the Robotine region, but to be honest, it looks very half-hearted in terms of the statement. It doesn't look like, you know, it is something, you know, like a true Ukrainian offensive. It doesn't look like it. It looks more like the Ukrainians just trying to, you know, control their line, stabilize their line, and it is looking quite bad if the Russians keep shelling them. And geolocation of there's geolocation of Ukrainian forces over at this position by Crimean Caprice. This one is on the August of 15. The units got shelled over there. They are holding this line. The Ukrainians are holding this line around here. This is what we know now. So this is an established line now. What is concerning for the Ukrainians is the use of flamethrower system, and it's pretty much in the rear position. So the Ukrainian forces they are gathering around this area, think that they are pretty safe, and then they got shelled by the flamethrower system. So pretty much everyone is dead. And it is possible to shell from this position because TOS-1A, the A version, has a 10-kilometer range. So basically, they can actually fire their artillery all the way out here, pretty far away. They can actually fire from here and hit their target. So the TOS-1A is not as short range as it used to be, and this is definitely a concern. Previously, we are seeing the shorter range versions, because of course they still have a lot of the short range versions, I guess. And this time around, to hit this position, I think it's a bit far for the old version. And over at the Novoprokopivka, there is appearance of reinforcement in the northeastern part of Novoprokopivka. We haven't seen the attack on Novoprokopivka, you know, in a sustained way. As you can see, after 13, 15, 17, the attacks is very sporadic, and the Ukrainians seems to be sending reinforcement to be able to launch a major attack over at Novoprokopivka, but most probably it's going to fail given the tide of war. And we have fighting reported on the eastern part of Novoprokopivka. According to Ryba, they say that the Ukrainian forces are trying to attack near the key heights, advance towards the key heights of this Balkar-Kryvo or Balkar-Kryva. So the Ukrainian forces are still trying to attack Russian strongholds, strong positions around this area here, and this is actually geolocated. There is also a corroboration. There's a geolocation of attack. Now this is the front line here, where the Ukrainian infantry were actually storming the trench line. That seems to be running around here, and but they were discouraged by shelling of artillery systems. Artillery was shelling them, so they actually gave up the assault in the trench lines. And further geolocation of this is not geolocation, this is reinforcement of Ukrainian forces on the western part of Verbove. Further units of the 71st arrived over here. I think this is the Jaeger unit, probably going to send in for reinforcement because sorry, because the offensive have not been doing very particularly well right now, because the Russians are doing counter-offensive. And so according to Ryba, they reported that the Ukrainian forces were trying to attack towards Verbove. Russian Defense Ministry also highlighted that the 71st Jaeger Brigade is close to Verbove. Anyway, I'm going to soften the way or relax the way how I talk. I'm running out of voice. So, calm down. The Russians are doing counter-offensive. Deep State UA reported that the Russians were doing counter-attacks, which actually affect the advance, which I actually did mention. Geolocation of Russian forces by Crimean Caprice. Over here, they were attacked by the Ukrainian forces. This is the Russian front line. And so this actually confirms our mapping so far, that the Ukrainians have not managed to break this final line. Although we did geolocate them previously over here, they are supposed to do one more hop into Verbove. This did not happen. And geolocation continued to show that the Ukrainians are holding some entrenched position around this area here. So The situation over at this area here in the Orikhiv sector, Robotine, Verbove, the Ukrainians are pretty much stuck. They are trying to expand outwards. So let's see how this goes. I will talk more about this in the conclusions. We move on to the Velika Novosibirsk sector. In the Velika Novosibirsk sector, there is Ukrainians attacking near Staromayorske. This is a continuation of the attacks in the 16th of September, and Ryba reported this fighting in the southern outskirts of Staromayorske, and this was then corroborated by the Russian Defense Ministry. Over at Pione, the fighting still continues with the Russian Defense Ministry. Vostok Group of Forces reported the Ukrainians sent some reconnaissance group to attack. The assault detachment to attack Pione. Did not work out. No frontline changes. Reinforcement was reported west of Staromayorske. According to Ryba, they say that these reinforcements are the 253rd Battalion of the 129th Brigade of the Territorial Defense, and then they were deployed from Makarivka. So Makarivka is actually here. So they were sent into this area here on the western part of Staromayorske. So they say that these are actually reserves, and this actually they say I don't think this is exactly the truth. They say that this actually confirms the losses of the rifle battalion of the 1st detachment that was previously operating there. I think this is a bit of a presumption, because it could just be a rotation with the rifle battalion sent out and then sent the territorial defense to hold the line. This probably what happened. To say that the unit got destroyed or taken out of action just so simply, a bit of a jumping to conclusions. There is geolocation of Ukrainian forces over in the eastern part of Uruzaine. So this geolocation is very interesting, because it shows a Ukrainian convoy moving this direction down, and then they got shelled. They got attacked by the Russian forces, which means that even though we map it in this way, there is actually no Ukrainian forces in this area, because this is just way too much near to the front line, and with Russians holding defensive positions around here. These lines here are all death traps. This line here can all be attacked by the Russian forces easily. So these are very concerning for the Ukrainians, which means that they actually do not have a buffer, a very controlled buffer. It's simply a no man's land buffer that actually secures Uruzaine in this way. Here, there's very, very few Ukrainian troops that is holding the flanks. We move on to the Donetsk front. There is no fighting being reported at Novodonetsk or Novomayorsk. The offensive over this area has been abandoned. They have cancelled the operation, and Ryba actually noted that there is information, there is intel about Ukrainian forces withdrawing from the northwestern outskirts of Novomayorsk, which is actually over here. The Ukrainians have been trying to hold this position, this particular ... position that look like a shit. This look like shit, a very healthy shit. This healthy shit, they are reportedly withdrawing. Holding this position has been highly costly, because we have so many drone strikes and artillery strikes being reported and even geolocated on video of in this area here, this entire shit line, and the Ukrainian forces just cannot hold this position, and this must be very, very disappointing, because they really spent a lot of military hardware and manpower to try to capture these two strategic towns, and they have failed, and this is actually very demoralizing for the Ukrainian side, I believe. We move on to the other side of the Donetsk front. We have continued fighting at Marinka. Ukrainian Defense Ministry continue to report the Russians are attacking, while the Russians say that the Ukrainians tried to counterattack on the 18th of September, but this was not reported on the 19th, so maybe this is just limited counterattack, and the Russians are still pretty much in the assertive. We move on into the Avdiivka front. Avdiivka front is very interesting. The Ukrainians are launching multiple attacks across multiple regions. There is fighting being reported at Vodian, as well as near Kimik. Kimik is actually 17th, so this is actually outdated information. I'm so sorry. So at Vodian, this is on the 18th of September. This is one off. We didn't see this report on the 19th. And there's also fighting reported at Kayamka on the 19th. And then there was fighting reported at Vasily on the 18th. So this is Vasily, this Kayamka. The Ukrainian forces are trying to probe, because all these are one-day attacks, so it looks like they're just probing to see where if there is any weakness that they can actually exploit. The geolocation of Russian forces over at this position just north of this lake actually help us to clarify the front line. Previously, the front line was actually around here, so this was actually recaptured some time ago. We do not know when, where the Russians actually hold back a more defendable line between the two lakes around here. And that's pretty much all from the Avdiivka front. The Ukrainian forces just doing probing attack. There is a geolocation of Ukrainian forces by military summary on the southern part of Avdiivka. So in this area here, so I believe we have ever geolocated Ukrainian forces here before. So this is actually just a new geolocation of the same place. And we move on into the Bakhmut front. At the Bakhmut front, we have Ukrainians attacking Mayos on the 18th to 19th. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, Ukrainian forces continue to hit this position because, like I said, this is actually very strategically important. It controls this entire road up. So the Ukrainian forces are trying. Over at the Andriivka region, the Russians are conducting counterattacks over at Andriivka. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry and Deep State UA reported the Russians are trying to do the counterattack, whereas we have reinforcement being reported south of Andriivka. According to Rybar, the Ukrainian forces are trying to gather a new force to make this push. So we shall see how this goes. This reinforcement was also reported on the western part of Klishchiivka, where the concentration of the 3rd Assault Brigade has actually taken up position, probably to reinforce the situation over Klishchiivka. Because despite the claim of the capture of Klishchiivka by the Ukrainian side, there is seemingly still fighting over at the northern part of Klishchiivka. Geolocation of Ukrainian forces on the 19th by Dnipro, Osin, Krymy Karapris, as well also Krymy Karapris, has actually shows that the Ukrainians are still conducting clearing operations, sweeping operations in the northern part, and that the Russians are still conducting fighting with them in the northern outskirts. This actually prompts Rybar to actually say that the claims of the capture is premature, and then it's pretty much still a gray zone, that the fighting is still ongoing at Klishchiivka. They have basically denied that this is the reality. The capturing is a reality. And Ukrainian Defense Ministry reported that the Russians are conducting counterattack on the 18th. And in today's report, Remelin, we haven't heard this name a lot because he pretty much reports mostly on the situation with Wagner. He said that the Wagner forces have actually returned and now helping the Russian forces to command and coordinate by Wagner fighters. They actually voluntarily returned to the front line over Klishchiivka region. So I think this is actually a pretty important news. He already mentioned that the Wagners has already signed some agreement or something, or get their request approved to return to the front line. So these Wagner fighters have returned to, and they chose Klishchiivka. So it's very interesting. We shall see whether this can be corroborated by any other sources, especially with Rybar and other sources, but we shall see. Let's see how this goes. Otherwise, Ukrainians are still pretty much on the on the one with the initiative over at Klishchiivka. We have more stuff over at the Bakhmut front. There is geolocation of Ukrainian forces positioned just outside of Bakhmut city on the 18th, geolocated by military summary over here. So the Russians are pretty much holding the city. It looks like it. And the Ukrainians are actually holding everywhere just outside. And further geolocation of Ukrainian forces over at Kromove actually confirms that Kromove was not captured by the Russian forces, or the Russians have decided not to hold this very hard to defend position. So this geolocation shows Ukrainian forces getting shelled, but they are in Kromove, and this actually leads us to officially confirm that Kromove is under Ukrainian control. So yeah, another capture. There is fighting reported west of Yakhidne. According to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, they say that the Russians are attacking in this direction. Maybe, maybe not. and there is reinforcement reported at Bodanivka. So this reinforcement probably signals either they are going to strengthen the defense or they are actually going to go on the counter attack. So we shall see how this goes. And moving on, we out of the Bakhmut front. That's all from the Bakhmut front. We move into the Sivas front. At the Sivas front, we have a new geolocation of Ukrainian forces in the northern part of Spurny. Military summary has geolocated this, showing Ukrainian forces getting shelled. They are just holding defensive positions around here, these two positions. So pretty much similar to what we had on our front lines modified previously. Over at Crimea front, this is Crimea front. At Crimea front, we have geolocation of Russian forces over at this part of the forest, as well as south of Dibrova. These geolocations help us adjust the mapping to show the latest situation over within the forest. Fighting is ongoing with the Deep State UA reporting that the Russians are trying to improve their tactical positions, while the Russian Defense Ministry reported on the 18th that the Ukrainians are conducting offensive operations. This offensive operation was also mentioned about in the same report of fighting at Dibrova, and Russian Defense Ministry on the 19th say that the fighting is on the south of Dibrova as well as at Torske. So pretty much the Ukrainians are still conducting most of the offensive operation like this. They are still conducting the operations. The Russians are just simply holding back the lines in this way, and the Ukrainians have not really broke through much. Not much. But of course, this is a big forest. This is like not just this arrow, this ruler here is 17 kilometers. So it is a very, very, very big forest. So it's pretty much very hellish to fight in this area here. We move up to Svetove front. At the Svetove front, the Surya maps reported that the Russians captured some positions in the northern part of Novoyehorivka. They managed to capture from this area to this area. So this is the new front line according to Surya maps. And this probably is the reports of the attack previously mentioned by the pro-Ukrainian source on the 12th of September. They said it was a feeble attempt, and Surya Maps updated the map to be so. So let's see how this goes. But we have clarification at Nadia. So Nadia previously was the front line. It was actually a low-lying village, and we do not know who actually hold it. Z Archive actually geolocated a video dated 17 September of Ukrainian forces over in Nadia in this position. So this helped us clarify the front line, and Nadia is actually under Ukrainian control. So this also shows how Ukrainians were attacking Ryhorovka, because we do have information of fighting at Ryhorovka last month. And we move on. There is geolocation of Ukrainian forces over at Stemakivka by Z Archive. So this also shows that we are actually correct in this position. Wait. Okay. Oops. My bad. There was just a weird prompt. I wonder I caught virus or something. No, there's a weird prompt. Then yeah. So anyway, this geolocation of Ukrainian forces over this position, and there is also geolocation of Ukrainian forces within Novoselivske. So now the Ukrainian forces is reported inside Novoselivske, and actually, which means that the Ukrainians have re-entered Novoselivske after Russians supposedly have captured it. So it looks like we're going to see more reports of fighting over at Novoselivske yet again. Moving on to, at the Kupiansk front, we have fighting being reported at Sinkivka. Ryba reported that the Russians resumed their attack over at Sinkivka and managed to destroy one of the crossings, some pontoon crossings across the Oskil River. But we do not have much details. So this report on the 19th, we shall see whether this is a sustained offensive operation or it's just a one-off attack over at the Sinkivka region in the Kupiansk front. And that's it for the SITREP or the summary for the day of 572 to 573 for the 18th to the 19th of September. So let's do some conclusions. The most significant, I would say there's a few things that is very significant. The first one was the rumor of the return of the Wagner forces. So Remelin reported this, that the Wagner fighters are now returning to command and coordinate the fighting for the Russian side over at Klishchiivka, because Klishchiivka has been this entire front line here is actually the worst performing right now over in the entire Russian defense line. And no wonder also, because like I mentioned multiple times, the Russians are never meant to come to this area here. This area is very, very hard to defend, and the Ukrainian forces exploited it. So this is also why I say that the Wagner, this could be the reason why the Wagner PMC have so much problems with the Russian military, because the Russian military never wanted them to travel this far out. So holding this entire Bakhmut front line is actually very vulnerable for the Russian forces. And yeah, the Wagner's coming back. We shall see whether this actually makes a difference, or whether we can actually corroborate this information at all, that the Wagner is actually back, and then whether this will lead to a reversal. And it is also important to note that the geolocations of Ukrainian forces over within Klishchiivka that shows that there is still sweeping operations within Klishchiivka. It's not a full capture by the Ukrainians just yet, and Ryba actually made it a point to claim that it's the case. But we do have reinforcement of Ukrainian forces in the western part of Klishchiivka, south of Andriivka, so we are probably going to expect more operations from the Ukrainian side. The Ukrainians' Bakhmut offensive is still not over. Another important thing to note is the end of the Novomayorske operation. There is no more reports of any fighting in this area here on the eastern side of the Velika Novosilka sector. The Ukrainian forces have given up trying to capture these two positions. They have basically been reported or rumored to be redrawing from the northwest of Novomayorske. As I mentioned during the SITREP, this area here, we have a lot of geolocation of Ukrainian forces in this area here that shows that they got shelled or drone strike by the Russian forces all over this area here. So the Ukrainian forces doing this withdrawal does make sense, because if they cannot break through into Novomayorske, then holding this position is just a suicide mission. So this is one massive success for the Russian side. It's quite amazing to see this is the case. And the situation here over at the Staromayorske Uruzane region doesn't seem much better for the Ukrainians. The geolocation of Ukrainian forces convoy moving down this tree line and then totally got destroyed by anti-tank or anti-tank guided missiles or artillery, shows that the Ukrainians don't even have a firm control over on this buffer zone. It is a buffer zone, it is an effective buffer zone, but they do not have effective control over the buffer zone. So the Russians actually have the effective control of the buffer zone, just that it is a buffer zone so that it protects the eastern flank of Uruzane. So this is important to note. And we also have some fighting at Staromayorske and Prione that doesn't change the front line, with reinforcement on the western part of Staromayorske does suggest that the Ukrainians are taking some losses perhaps that requires the reinforcement. But further reinforcement over to moving towards the Orikhiv sector where Robotine and Verbove is continues. We have a massive convoy at Dnipro that was spotted, over 3,000 soldiers. There is also another force of another battalion that is actually positioned at Veselyanka. And so this could also help out to make sure that this front line over at the Kayamsky sector does not fall. However, over in the Orikhiv sector, everything got stuck. The Ukrainian forces are unable to break through the southern outskirts of Robotine. Despite previously I thought that holding these two entrenchments would actually help them, but it did not. Pretty much they actually tried to hold this position, and basically while they are trying to secure and hold this position, making themselves comfortable, the Russians gave them a lot of presents. So all this shelling and the geolocation of this shelling is just hard to watch. Can't imagine to be a soldier to be deployed to that southern outskirts of Robotine. The Ukrainians are continue to try. They are currently stuck at this western outskirt of Verbove. The Russians are holding very effective line along this forest. We have geolocation of Ukrainians trying to storm the line. So far, it shows that the Ukrainians have not captured this front line just yet, and this prompts the Ukrainians to actually swing outwards. And this is actually what they're currently doing. They are trying to storm southward from this because they cannot break this line. This line is too strong at this moment. They are heading in other directions, and there is geolocation to show exactly just that of Ukrainian forces storming the trench line that is around here. So but it was not successful because the Russians seem to have very good coordination with their artillery to actually make sure that they can't break through. And the Ukrainians are sending more reinforcement. The 1st Jaeger sends more reinforcement to this area here on the western part of Verbove. And there's also reinforcement being sent to the northeastern part of Novoprokopivka. And so the situation continues like this. The attack seems to have been bogged down at this moment. We do have information of Abrams entering Ukraine. I wonder if Ukraine will actually jump the gun and actually deploy the Abrams in support of the offensive. What is interesting is that we haven't really seen much more of the Leopard tanks being used in offensive operation. There's no geolocation of them. The only footage I see them was them driving a Leopard tank on the highway, and that's it. So that's something interesting to note. And furthermore, we have this viral video which I also published on the DPA War channel of the drone strike at Kryvyi Air Base. And like I mentioned during the SITREP, this is actually very far. This distance of 70 to 80 kilometers from the possible launch site is ridiculous. On top of that, it's not just the Lancet, but it's also the surveillance drone. The surveillance drone also was hovering around Kryvyi to record this attack. So it means that the Russians actually have this range in terms of if they would really want to use their Lancet and surveillance drone to monitor and attack Ukrainian positions. On top of that, the fact that the surveillance drone can fly and hover for this long over Kryvyi also means that the surface-to-air missile systems of the Ukrainian side is severely lacking or inoperable, or they're inactive or totally non-existent. This can also be seen by the Russians launching airstrikes on Ukrainian storage over just near Antonovka. They use the FAB 500 or FAB 1500 just bombs. A very big explosion exploded at this position. This also actually went pretty viral. And this massive explosion is the first time I have seen the Russian Air Force operating in this front line for some time. Previously, there was some S-300s and some surface-to-air missile system being deployed over in the Kherson and Mykolaiv region, and this actually prohibited the Russians from deploying their Air Force to help out in the defense, particularly over at Dachi. And the fact that now the Air Force are back, the Russians are back with their Air Force, means that the Ukrainian troops over in these positions are going to suffer even more. And we also have the flamethrower system being deployed in this region, in the Kherson region, as they use it to shell the Ukrainian forces in the southern part of the Antonovsky railway bridge, opposite of Pridniprovsk. So I'm not sure if there's still any more Ukrainian troops surviving this area here. Definitely everyone around this area are now all dead with this strike here. So this is actually very depressing. But Ukrainians are not giving up. They have landing north of Stepny. So this Stepny and the Ukrainian forces continue to land forces to establish observation posts on the shorelines. And this is already in the southern part of Kherson. So this is actually pretty significant. And the Ukrainians also continue to land troops over on the Kozatsky island. This is the Kozachi island, sorry. Kozatsky, same. So they continue to land troops, and actually they are now considered to have a strong foothold in the northern part of this island. The entire operation over here is the aim is actually to capture the Kakhovka Dam. So they have not captured the Kakhovka Dam. To capture it, they have to capture the entire city of Nova Kakhovka. So of course, it's not going to happen anytime soon, because you need a lot of troops to actually capture a city. So we do have a big concentration of manpower over at Definitive Breed. We haven't heard of this name for some time, and they actually have light armor vehicles that allows them to operate in the muddy season. So probably this is just holding force. I doubt they have the capability to send them across the river. They're probably here as a standby reserve force to prevent any Russian attacks. So if any Russians dare to cross the river during the muddy season, they can actually operate and actually deal with it. This is actually a tactic that was proposed by Rommel in the defense of Normandy. He wanted the tanks to concentrate in one region so that they can be deployed quickly depending on where the Allied forces land. And yeah, it is a good tactic. Of course, Hitler decided to spread them out. So Hitler do Hitler things, and of course we have another Ukrainian vessels trying to land on the Crimean beaches, and this is a continuation of the Ukrainian Black Sea operations that is always operated in combined operations. They send missile strikes. So the missile strike was actually flying through this direction across Melitopol to hit the Crimean bridge, and then there was drones then fly over to Sevastopol, and the Ukrainian forces try to land troops on Crimea. So this is a pretty standard operating procedure now for the Ukrainians. The Russians actually took out this Shadow Storm missiles over Melitopol, and the drones also did not manage to reach the airbase. They got shot down and also intercepted by electronic warfare, and then these vessels got hit by airstrikes. So the Ukrainians will try again, I'm quite sure. And that's it for the conclusion or summary of the day of 572 to 573. If you want to access the full SITREP, which I go into a lot of details, do consider becoming a Patreon member, Coffee member, Boosty, or Locals. As long as you're a paying member, you'll get access to the SITREPs, and also you can also get this SITREP by becoming a YouTube member on the DPA main channel or the DPA War channel. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next update.